Welcome back to Teenage Nightmares, the place that drags you deeper into the world of the unknown. Tonight's story takes us on a haunting journey of the sea. So sit back, grab your headphones, get a blanket, and get ready to drift off into another Teenage Nightmares original, A Sailor's Tale. My name is Dale, and this story takes place in the summer of 1967. I had just turned 17 when I decided to buy a boat and spend the summer out on the ocean. It was supposed to be my last taste of freedom before joining the military after high school, a carefree adventure I'd remember for the rest of my life. Or so I thought. My father had a friend who was selling his old boat. It was in great shape, complete with sleeping quarters. It sounded perfect for my plans. Up until that point, I'd only heard about it through my father, so I arranged to meet the owner, Harold, to see it in person. Harold was in his late 50s and had a strange, unsettling aura about him. He agreed to sell me the boat for $150, which seemed like a fair deal. Before I left, though, Harold shared something that stuck with me. He warned me about the boat's dark history. He said a friend of his had died on the vessel, a man who had confessed to killing over 20 women during his time in World War II before taking his own life right in front of Harold. Harold claimed the boat hadn't felt the same since that day, that something about it had changed. I brushed it off, thinking he was just a crazy old man. I told him my father would come by later to pick it up. I stocked up on non-perishables and packed a couple of fishing poles, along with the basics, water, tools, and a lantern in case the nights got too dark. My father had the boat set up and ready to sail, as always. He dropped me off at the dock with a firm handshake, a few words of advice, and wished me the best of luck. As I cast off, I could already feel the excitement building. The first day at sea was everything I'd hoped for. An endless expanse of blue, the boat gently rocking with the waves, and no one around for miles. The freedom felt intoxicating. When night came, I made myself a simple dinner, the faint glow of the stove casting a warm light across the boat's wooden deck. The stars blinked down from above, and the air carried a salty freshness that seemed to wash away any lingering worries. Sitting back, I let the steady sounds of the ocean lull me into a peaceful state. I picked up a novel, letting the words drift in and out of my mind as the boat creaked softly in time with the waves. The next day passed much like the first. There was an endless calm, the peaceful rhythm of the waves, and the isolation that felt both comforting and freeing. It wasn't until the third night that something strange happened. I was lying down, absorbed in my novel, the soft light of my lantern flickering gently. It was late, maybe around 11 p.m., when I first heard it. At first, I thought it was the usual creaks and groans of the boat, adjusting to the movement of the sea. But no, this was different. It sounded like footsteps, heavy and slow, as if someone walking up on deck was trying not to make noise. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, straining my ears. It wasn't the comforting sound of the boat swaying or the waves gently crashing against it. These were human footsteps, the kind you couldn't mistake. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe another boater had spotted my boat in the distance and with bad intentions was trying to rob me. The thought of confronting someone, alone in the middle of the ocean, felt like a terrible idea. I didn't want to go up there. Whatever it was, I wasn't sure I wanted to see it. A few hours passed, and the strange noises stopped. There was nothing but the sound of the waves. The ocean's calm brought me peace, and I fell asleep almost instantly. The next morning, I went up to check the deck, expecting to find something. Footprints, signs that someone had been there. But to my surprise, there was nothing. No footprints, no signs of anything out of place. The boat looked exactly the way I had left it. It was definitely strange, but I brushed it off, telling myself maybe I was just imagining things. But later that night around 1 a.m., I was tossing and turning, unable to shake the unease that had settled over me. Something didn't feel right. That's when I sat up, and my eyes locked onto something that made my heart stop. A figure stood just 5 feet away from me. At first, I couldn't make out any details, just the outline of a tall man, maybe around 6'3". I shouted at him, demanding to know what he wanted. What happened next left me completely stunned. Without a sound, the figure vanished. Gone. No trace, no movement. I scrambled out of bed, rushing around the cabin, checking every corner. But there was nothing. No one. It was just me on the boat, alone in the middle of the sea. I spent the rest of the night terrified, barely managing to get any sleep. I finally passed out around 3 a.m., and when I woke up, the sun was already up. I had no idea what to do next, so I grabbed my fishing pole and cast it into the water, sitting there, lost in thought, replaying the events of the night before. When out of nowhere, I was shoved violently to the ground. I looked around, my heart racing, but there was no one. I stood up, with my anger boiling over. "What do you want from me?" I shouted into the empty air. That's when Harold's words hit me like a punch. Maybe the evil man who killed himself on this boat wasn't gone after all. Maybe he was still here, lingering, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, I was his next target. I didn't know what to do. I was too far from home to turn back, and the nearest shore was still days away. I was trapped, stuck in the middle of the ocean with whatever this thing was. After some thought, I decided my best chance was to head for the nearest shore. Everything seemed fine at first. I focused on the horizon, hoping the miles would pass quickly. But as the sun began to set, the uneasy feeling returned, stronger this time. Each moment the light faded, the tension in the air grew heavier. It felt suffocating. By the time the sky was swallowed by darkness, there was only the faint moonlight to guide me. I could barely stand the weight of it. I retreated to the sleeping quarters, hoping that if I fell asleep quickly, I could avoid whatever nightmare was waiting for me. But as I laid in bed, struggling to relax, something unnatural caught my eye. A strange mist began creeping in through a window I'd left open. My heart pounded as the mist thickened, swirling unnaturally, and then I heard him making a low guttural growl, right behind me. The sound froze me to my core. It wasn't just a noise, it was a presence, a dark and overpowering presence. I knew I couldn't let it take me. I grew up in a religious household, taught to pray through every storm. And this was the worst storm I had ever faced. My voice shook, but I began to pray, calling on God to protect me from whatever evil was here. In the middle of my prayer, a sudden force ripped through the air. Before I could even register what was happening, something heavy and cold struck me square in the forehead. Pain erupted, and the world around me dissolved into darkness. When I came to, the room was bathed in the pale gray light of early morning. It had to be around 6 a.m. My chest felt tight as I gasped for air, my pulse racing wildly. I blinked a few times, disoriented, scanning the room with frantic eyes. It was empty, silent. The mist was gone. The shadows that had lingered earlier seemed to have retreated. But the oppressive weight of the night hadn't fully lifted. It was as if the air still carried the remnants of something being wrong. I reached up to touch my forehead and winced. My fingers brushed against a swollen lump. Whatever had hit me wasn't there anymore. But the sense of being watched, that eerie feeling lingered. The only positive was that whatever had been in my room was gone for now. I was still a day's journey from shore, which meant one more night on this cursed boat. The very thought sent a chill crawling up my spine, but I had no choice. Staying with whatever haunted this vessel was better than taking my chances in the open sea, where the sharks waited. I tried to distract myself, casting lines and reeling in fish as the sun lingered high in the sky. The rhythm of the waves against the hull and the salty breeze gave the illusion of peace, but it was fragile, so fragile. I knew the truth. This calm was only a temporary reprieve, the stillness before the storm. Every glance toward the horizon reminded me of the sun's slow descent. Summer meant longer days, and for that, I was grateful. I savored every golden moment, each second of daylight stretching thinner as the evening drew near. But the fear never left me. No matter how hard I tried to focus on fishing, the memory of last night clung to me like a shadow, a gnawing awareness that once darkness fell, the terror would return. As the night approached, I decided to cook dinner. The scent of fresh fish filled the air as I sat by the stove, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The calmness of the water, The soft glow of twilight and the gentle rush of wind created a moment of serenity. For the first time in days, I felt at peace. But peace doesn't last long out here. A sudden crash shattered the stillness. The door to my cabin flung open with violent force. My head snapped toward the noise, my pulse quickening. The doorway was empty, the shadows beyond thick and impenetrable. I hesitated, frozen in place, my mind racing. It took what felt like an eternity to gather enough courage to investigate. With shaky steps, I made my way down, each creak of the wooden floorboards echoing in the silence. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed, a chill unlike anything I'd ever felt wrapped around me. It was unnaturally cold, so cold that I could see my breath forming in soft, white puffs before me. Then, I saw him. To my left, standing in the corner, was the figure. He was no longer just a vague shadow. He moved now, shifting in quick, unnatural bursts like a flickering image caught between frames. My stomach dropped, and every instinct screamed for me to run. I turned and bolted back up to the deck, heart pounding in my chest. The open air felt safer, less suffocating than the cabin below, but the relief was short-lived. A warm, steady breath brushed against the back of my neck, sending ice down my spine. I froze, terror rooting me in place as I felt his presence, heavy and suffocating, right behind me. He wasn't in the cabin anymore. He was here. He had me in his clutches. I couldn't see him, but his presence was suffocating, an invisible force pressing down on me like the weight of the ocean. Suddenly, I was lifted into the air, my body helpless against his strength, and hurled into the cabin door with a bone-rattling crash. Stars exploded in my vision, and for a moment, I couldn't tell up from down. Before I could regain my senses, he hoisted me again, his grip cold and unrelenting. I felt everything but saw no one. It was terrifying. I felt my body dangling as if held by a giant hand, and then I was being carried, dragged to the edge of the boat. I kicked and flailed, but it was no use. With a violent toss, he threw me overboard. The water swallowed me whole, icy and unforgiving. I gasped and flailed until I broke the surface, coughing and sputtering. Then, as if by some miracle, I saw the glimmer of a light cutting through the darkness. Another boat was approaching. Its engine roared as it drew nearer, and I shouted with every ounce of strength I had left. The man on board spotted me, his eyes wide with disbelief, and he maneuvered as close as he could. "Grab the line," he yelled, tossing a rope into the water. I latched onto it with trembling hands, holding on as if my life depended on it, which it did. Slowly, he hauled me onto his deck. Collapsing in a heap, I gasped for air and felt the solid ground beneath me. "Thank you," I choked out over and over. The man stared at me, his face pale. What the hell happened out there? I tried to explain, my words tumbling out in a frantic blur. His expression shifted from skepticism to shock. "If I hadn't seen you hanging in the air like that, I wouldn't have believed it." When we reached shore, I reported the boat as abandoned. I wanted nothing more to do with it. Whatever evil haunted that vessel could stay out there, adrift and forgotten. Eventually, I made it home. Harold was the only one who truly understood. When I told him what had happened, he sighed with a strange mix of relief and regret. "At least someone believes me now," he muttered. He shared his experience with me, and honestly it made mine look like a walk in the park. Harold had a scar on his chest. He claims that the same spirit that tried killing me threw a knife in his chest but missed all major arteries. That summer was the worst of my life, a nightmare I'll never forget, but I survived. Somehow, I survived to tell the tale, same as Harold. So, to the restless spirit of that World War II veteran who haunts that cursed vessel, let us never cross paths again. Thanks for watching, a Teenage Nightmares original. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.